It's an enormous amount of material. I wish we had more time to search. It has been one of the greatest pleasures of my life.
It's impossible to follow a Rick Lagina speech, so I am not going to even try.
For more than 2 centuries, Oak Island has guarded its secrets beneath layers of earth, timber, and silence. Deep inside the legendary Money Pit, the team expected to uncover treasure, gold, jewels, ancient artifacts, or something else of extraordinary value. But what eventually came to light was far more unsettling. Instead of riches, they encountered a hidden list of names. Names that appeared to point toward betrayal, deception, and a truth that someone may have intentionally buried. Using advanced scanning technology and precision drilling, the team identified what appeared to be a concealed chamber deep beneath the island. It was a space long whispered about in fragile manuscripts and stories passed down through generations of treasure hunters. Could this finally be the long-rumored vault connected to centuries-old secrets? Or had Oak Island once again created another trap for those bold enough to challenge its mysteries? Then, during the final hours of the excavation, something so shocking happened that Rick eventually left the island under the cover of darkness, carrying questions that seemed heavier than any treasure they could have discovered. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next shocking discovery. During Season 13, the atmosphere on Oak Island seemed heavier than ever. There was a powerful sense of anticipation, mixed with an uneasy feeling that the team might finally be getting close to something significant. It was that familiar sensation of standing on the edge of a discovery, a feeling that treasure hunters have experienced on this island for more than 2 centuries. After the previous season produced several promising but ultimately inconclusive discoveries in the complicated network of tunnels near the shaft known as Toot 1, the team understood that this season needed to produce genuine answers. Rick Lagina, driven by his enduring belief that something important was hidden beneath the island, and his brother Marty Lagina, whose practical and cautious approach kept the operation grounded, arrived at the same conclusion. There would be no more half measures. This time, they would go deeper, search a wider area, and use more advanced methods. Their attention remained firmly focused on the legendary Money Pit, the very location that has consumed fortunes, claimed countless years of people's lives, and protected its secrets since at least the early 1700s, and possibly even earlier. To finally break through the mystery, the team installed a massive new steel caisson, which they nicknamed Cerberus. The name was inspired by Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian of the underworld in ancient mythology. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. If something truly was being protected deep beneath Oak Island, this enormous machine had been designed to confront it head-on. Cerberus was far more than another attempt. It was larger, stronger, and engineered to reach depths that previous shafts could not. Its reinforced structure was designed to withstand the unstable ground that had frustrated and defeated generations of searchers. "We're not testing the waters anymore," Marty said early in the operation, speaking with unusual confidence. His words revealed a rare spark of excitement beneath his normally cautious and financially practical approach. "This is our shot," Rick added quietly and thoughtfully. He believed the island had already given them fragments, small clues, and scattered pieces of a much larger puzzle. Now, they needed to find the centerpiece. But Oak Island was not about to surrender its secrets easily. The first weeks of the operation were extremely difficult. Bucket after bucket was brought to the surface, filled with mud, clay, debris, and remnants left behind by centuries of unsuccessful excavations. Every load was examined with extreme care. Metal detection expert Gary Drayton moved his coil across the piles of excavated material, carefully listening for the distinctive signal that could indicate something important, a discovery he often describes as a smoking hot find. The search had entered a new phase, but the real question remained. What exactly was waiting beneath the ground? And if the team truly had discovered a hidden chamber, what secrets had Oak Island been protecting for all these centuries? Whatever the answer, the deeper they went, the more it seemed that the island's greatest mystery was no longer simply about lost treasure. It could be about the people who had been connected to it, and the truth they may have desperately wanted to keep hidden. Then came a major setback. Without warning, the Cerberus shaft flooded, bringing the operation to a sudden halt. Pumps had to run around the clock just to keep the rising water under control. "It's like the island fights back every time we get close," Jack Begley said, covered in mud and clearly frustrated. Even his usual optimism seemed to fade. During those difficult stretches, Rick's steady determination became the team's source of strength. He would often stand silently near the edge of the shaft, looking down into the darkness as though he were having a quiet conversation with the mystery hidden below, and somehow it almost seemed as if Oak Island was listening. After weeks of exhausting work and seemingly endless mud, the island finally began giving the team small but meaningful clues. Gary Drayton, whose instinct for detecting metal has become almost legendary among the team, discovered an unusual fragment buried deep inside the excavated material. It wasn't iron, and it wasn't gold either. Emma Culligan later confirmed that the layer of soil where the object was found dated back to the late 1600s. "It's not treasure, mates," Gary called out as he held up the small green patinated object. "But it's got a story. A big one." The object was far too delicate to have been part of heavy machinery, yet its unusual shape made it difficult to identify as a coin or other form of currency. No one could immediately determine exactly what it was. But one detail stood out. Whoever had left the object behind appeared to have possessed metalworking abilities that seemed remarkably advanced for the period associated with the discovery. Then another breakthrough emerged. Deep below the surface, buried within untouched clay, the team uncovered a series of carefully shaped wooden beams. These were not rough logs like those discovered during previous excavations. Instead, the beams appeared to have been cut, shaped, and fitted together deliberately, suggesting they could have been components of a much larger engineered structure. When the carbon dating results finally arrived, the atmosphere inside the war room changed completely. The wood appeared to predate the discovery of the money pit in 1795, potentially by several centuries. Excitement spread through the planning room. These discoveries weren't the single definitive answer Rick had always hoped to find, but they provided something equally important: solid evidence that human activity had taken place on Oak Island long before the famous treasure hunts of the late 1700s. Even Marty, who had always approached the investigation with a practical and skeptical mindset, began to acknowledge what the evidence was suggesting. Something significant had happened on Oak Island long before the treasure mystery was officially recorded. During their discussions, Rick and Marty would sometimes exchange a quiet look, the kind of glance that only brothers can truly understand. It was a shared feeling that they might finally be getting closer to something extraordinary. But despite these discoveries, it still felt like they were only seeing the beginning. The island seemed to be keeping its greatest secret even deeper beneath the surface. Cerberus would have to go farther. Everyone on the team could sense it. After years of working together, that collective intuition was difficult to dismiss. The artifacts they had recovered did not feel like the final destination. They felt more like signposts, clues pointing towards something much larger. Then came the moment that changed everything. Late in Season 13, the enormous Cerberus caisson pushed beyond 200 feet underground. At that depth, the ancient bedrock beneath Oak Island began producing a series of new and unusual anomalies. Then the sonic drilling data revealed something no one expected. The readings did not match the chaotic water-filled channels the team had encountered before. They also didn't resemble solid limestone bedrock. Instead, the scans appeared to indicate a void, a clearly defined, almost geometric space hidden beneath layers the team had already investigated. "We've hit something different," Dr. Ian Spooner said, barely able to contain his excitement as he examined the data. "This doesn't appear natural. It looks engineered." The war room immediately fell silent. Everyone stared at the information appearing on the screen. Rick leaned forward, his eyes locked on the trembling display. For the first time, the possibility seemed stronger than ever that the team wasn't simply dealing with another natural feature of the island. They might have found evidence of something deliberately constructed deep beneath Oak Island, And if that interpretation was correct, the question was no longer simply whether a treasure existed. The real question was who built it, why it was hidden, and what secrets had been waiting there for centuries. Marty exchanged a serious glance with Craig Tester. There was no hesitation this time. They made the decision to deploy the fiber optic camera. This wasn't ordinary equipment. The camera had been specifically designed to survive enormous pressure while transmitting high-resolution images from extreme depths. Preparing it was a careful process that took several days. The team calibrated the equipment, tested every component, and checked the entire system repeatedly before sending it underground. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Finally, Alex Lagina and the drilling crew began lowering the camera into the darkness of the Cerberus shaft. At first, the lens moved through cloudy water filled with debris. Visibility was poor, and the team could see very little. Then suddenly, the camera entered open space. Gasps immediately filled the war room. This wasn't another collapsed cavity packed with loose rubble. The camera appeared to have entered a chamber, an intact space that looked deliberately constructed. As the camera lights illuminated the area, the team saw walls that looked nothing like the rough limestone naturally found beneath Oak Island. Instead, the walls appeared to be covered with smooth, dark stone slabs, carefully fitted together. Their surfaces looked polished and almost reflective. And there was another problem. The stone didn't appear to belong to Oak Island. "Wow, just wow," Doug Crowell whispered. "Where did that come from?" As the camera slowly rotated, even more details began to emerge. Built into one of the walls was a large circular metal plate. Its surface was covered with intricate swirling patterns and unfamiliar symbols. The material wasn't obviously gold or silver. It was dark, highly polished, and seemed to absorb the light coming from the camera. Below the plate, much clearer markings had been carved directly into a massive stone block. The carvings appeared to include crosses, celestial symbols resembling stars and planets, and what looked disturbingly similar to a simple map. For several moments, nobody spoke. Rick tightly placed a hand on Marty's shoulder. "This is it," Rick said, his voice filled with emotion. "This isn't just treasure." For once, Marty had no skeptical response. He simply stared at the footage in disbelief. "I don't even know what to say," he quietly admitted. Within hours, the footage had been sent to a carefully selected group of specialists from around the world. Among them was Dr. Aaron Taylor, who was asked to examine the architectural features of the mysterious chamber. If the chamber was genuine, its discovery could potentially change everything the team thought they knew about Oak Island. A leading scholar in ancient symbolism from Cambridge University was brought in to study the unusual carvings. At the same time, a respected metallurgical expert was asked to analyze the mysterious circular plate. Their initial conclusions sent a wave of excitement through the entire team. Dr. Aaron Taylor confirmed what many of them had already begun to suspect. The chamber was clearly man-made. Its construction appeared precise, deliberate, and carefully engineered for long-term stability. Whoever built the structure had taken considerable effort to make sure it would survive underground, and just as importantly, it appeared to have been designed so that it would not be easily discovered. But the stone itself created an even bigger mystery. The walls appeared to be constructed from basalt, a dense, dark volcanic rock that isn't naturally found in Nova Scotia. If the identification was correct, then the material must have been transported to Oak Island from somewhere else. That would have required planning, manpower, transportation, and considerable resources. Then the metal analysis introduced another fascinating possibility. The circular plate could potentially be made from an alloy such as electrum, a natural or manufactured mixture of gold and silver. Another possibility was tumbaga, an alloy combining gold and copper. Both types of metal were historically used not only because of their value, but also for symbolic and ceremonial purposes. Pre-Columbian civilizations were known to work with similar alloys. Certain secretive medieval groups also used precious metals in ways that carried religious or spiritual significance. The more the specialists examined the evidence, the harder it became to dismiss the structure as a random underground formation. Everything about it appeared deliberate. The construction, the stone, the markings, and the mysterious metal plate. There was clearly a purpose behind what the team had discovered, but then came one tense moment that the team would later remember with nervous laughter. Because what happened next raised an entirely new set of questions about the chamber and about the people who may have built it. As the fiber optic camera moved closer to the chamber, just before it was about to pass completely into the mysterious void, the live video suddenly disappeared. The monitors went black. Static filled the screens for what felt like an eternity, nearly 3 agonizing minutes. Nobody moved. The team had no idea what had happened. Had the chamber collapsed? Had they lost the camera? Was the shaft becoming unstable? Jack Begley immediately began attaching himself to a safety harness, preparing to go down if the situation required it. Then, without warning, the picture came back. And this time, the image was even clearer than before. Everyone in the war room finally released the breath they had been holding. For a moment, it almost seemed as though Oak Island itself had paused before allowing them to see what was hidden below. What appeared on the screen didn't look like an ordinary treasure vault. There were no obvious piles of coins or chests overflowing with jewels. Instead, the chamber seemed more like a time capsule, a carefully preserved message that had been deliberately sealed away from the outside world. It appeared to be connected not simply to wealth, but to forgotten knowledge, ancient traditions, and a legacy that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect. And that changed the entire meaning of the discovery. News of the mysterious chamber quickly attracted attention from around the world. Historians, artifact specialists, and researchers who had spent years following the Oak Island mystery suddenly became intensely interested in the discovery. The final weeks of Season 13 turned into a whirlwind of investigation and analysis. The team spent long nights speaking with experts from different parts of the world, while the growing evidence suggested that what they had found could be far more significant than anyone had initially imagined. The symbols and the mysterious metal plate appeared to hold the most important clues. Dr. Alistair Finch, a Cambridge specialist in ancient inscriptions, examined high-resolution images of the carvings day and night from thousands of miles away. Meanwhile, on Oak Island, Emma Culligan and Lair Nan compared the strange markings with known Masonic symbols and alchemical insignia associated with the medieval and Renaissance periods. Rick Lagina also began studying ancient manuscripts, searching for anything that might resemble the symbols discovered beneath the island. He was looking for a connection, any clue that could explain what they had uncovered. Then came the breakthrough. Late one night, Dr. Finch appeared on the war room screen. He looked visibly excited by what he had discovered. "I have identified a pattern," he announced. "This isn't a conventional language. It's symbolic shorthand, a coded visual system." The room became completely silent. Finch explained that the style appeared to have similarities to a lesser-known faction reportedly associated with the Knights Templar, a group he referred to as the Order of the Sacred Covenant. The mention of the Knights Templar immediately changed the atmosphere. The name alone carried centuries of mystery and speculation. Dr. Finch explained that when the Templars were arrested in 1307, under the orders of King Philip IV of France, historical legends claimed that a secret fleet departed from La Rochelle shortly before the crackdown. According to those stories, the ships may have carried sacred relics, enormous wealth, and confidential records before disappearing from historical records. But what if, Finch suggested, a splinter group had been entrusted with protecting that legacy? That possibility suddenly gave the symbols on Oak Island a completely different meaning. When the geometric carvings were compared with recently digitized medieval documents from Portugal and Scotland, some of the markings appeared to correspond with celestial positions. In other words, they may have represented a star chart. Then there was the circular metal plate. Finch proposed that it might not have been treasure at all. Instead, it could have been an instrument, possibly an astrolabe, or even a type of cipher device designed to help interpret the celestial map. According to Finch, the chamber wasn't simply a vault. "It's a marker," he explained gravely. "A directional signal. It was built to endure and to guide. But that immediately raised the most important question. Guide them to what? Perhaps sacred relics. Perhaps lost theological writings. Or possibly the long-rumored Templar archives. Finch then pointed out one particular engraving that appeared repeatedly throughout the chamber. It was a distinctive cross enclosed within what seemed to be the outline of a small structure. The sanctuary symbol, Finch explained. According to his interpretation, the symbol represented a final refuge in certain ancient writings. Then he made a statement that sent a chill through the entire room. Consider 1307. The arrests, the missing fleet. He paused before continuing. History tells us they vanished. And if the symbols beneath Oak Island were connected to that disappearance, the team could be looking at evidence of a secret journey that had remained hidden for centuries. The chamber might not have been built to hide treasure alone. It may have been designed to preserve a message and point towards something that its creators never wanted the world to forget. But what if they never actually disappeared? What if they crossed the Atlantic instead? The team began to understand just how enormous the theory really was. Charles Barkhouse finally broke the silence. But how? He questioned whether such a journey would have even been possible during the early 14th century. Dr. Finch nodded thoughtfully. Nearly impossible, he replied. But the Templars were not ordinary knights. They controlled important ports throughout the Mediterranean, had access to fleets, and possessed considerable experience with navigation and long-distance travel. Some theories even suggest that they may have possessed advanced maritime knowledge, possibly inherited from earlier civilizations. Finch continued by explaining that many Templars eventually found protection in Scotland under King Robert the Bruce. Scotland already had a strong seafaring tradition, and a transatlantic expedition launched from there would have been much harder for the French crown to stop. Some theories suggest the Templars could have relied on knowledge preserved in Viking accounts. Others believe they may have had access to old maps and geographical information that had disappeared from mainstream history. If any of this was true, Oak Island might not have been hiding ordinary treasure at all. It could have been protecting a legacy deliberately transported across the Atlantic centuries before Christopher Columbus. And if that possibility was correct, then the chamber beneath the money pit wasn't the end of the mystery. It was only the beginning of something much greater. The North Atlantic routes were dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. But to experienced sailors from the northern seas, they were not completely unknown. If even part of Dr. Finch's theory proved accurate, the implications would be enormous. For generations, people had assumed that the money pit contained pirate treasure, royal wealth, or some other forgotten fortune. But now, a very different possibility was emerging. What if Oak Island wasn't hiding stolen gold? What if the entire site was the result of a carefully planned mission? A long-term effort by a secretive Templar faction to preserve and transmit a message across generations. Perhaps the treasure was never meant to be removed. Maybe it wasn't even meant to be found in the traditional sense. Instead, it could have been a sacred mystery deliberately placed beyond the money pit itself. The chamber wasn't the vault. It was the signpost. Rick Lagina, who had dedicated decades of his life to solving the Oak Island mystery, stood visibly overwhelmed by what they had discovered. Tears filled his eyes. In many ways, the discovery seemed to confirm the belief that had driven him for so many years, that Oak Island had never been an ordinary place. The story had always seemed much larger than a simple treasure hunt. But with that apparent confirmation came an even more serious realization. If persecuted Templar knights really had crossed the Atlantic during the early 14th century, carrying relics, knowledge, and a specific purpose, and then constructed such a carefully engineered underground marker on a remote island, the scale of their achievement would be almost impossible to comprehend. So, the money pit, Rick said slowly as he looked around at his team and then at his brother. It wasn't the destination. It was the doorway. Marty, who had spent years approaching the mystery with caution and skepticism, now stood beside Rick with a quiet sense of conviction. The evidence had clearly changed his perspective. He placed a reassuring hand on Rick's shoulder. "It looks like, brother," Marty said softly, almost in disbelief, We found the X, but it doesn't mark the treasure. It tells us how to find it." He paused before adding that whoever had constructed the chamber must have been far more capable and determined than they had ever imagined. The final moments of Season 13 passed in a thoughtful silence. There was no wild celebration. Instead, the team stood together, trying to understand the enormous implications of what they had witnessed. Yet this wasn't the answer anyone had expected to find. If these ancient clues really are pointing towards something much greater, something that may have been protected for more than 7 centuries, then the biggest question remains unanswered. What will the team uncover next season? Because the real journey may have only just begun. Like and subscribe for more incredible discoveries and the next chapter of the Oak Island mystery.